guys, it's me Talita.
And it's me Valen.
In this video, we're going to take a journey through the evolution of English literature,
Focusing on two crucial periods, Old English and Middle English literature. So, let's get started and discover.
The origin of Old English comes from the arrival of three Germanic nations who invaded or colonized the British nation in the 5th century AD. The Germans crossed the Northern Sea, which is now Denmark and northern Germany. Old English literature, often referred to as Anglo-Saxon literature, written from 7th century to the decades of the Norman conquest of 1066, a period often termed Anglo-Saxon England. Old English literature is the earliest form of English literary tradition. It was heavily influenced by oral storytelling and a blend of pagan and Christian themes, written in a language vastly different from modern English, with influences from Germanic and Norse tongues. Now I'm going to explain you an overview of the history of Old English literature. The Angles and Saxons conquered what is now called England in the 5th and 6th centuries. In the 7th century, Christian missionaries taught the English to write. The English wrote down law codes and later their poems. Northumbria soon produced Caedmon and Bede. Heroic poetry of Christian kind is the chief legacy of Old English literature, notably Beowulf and the Elegies. A considerable prose literature grew up after Alfred. There were 4 centuries of writing in English before the Norman conquest. Old English literature is part of English literature, and some of it deserves discussion here on literary merit. Besides merit, it needed the luck to be committed to writing and to survive. The Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes were illiterate. Their orally composed verses were not written unless they formed part of runic inscriptions. There are 5 key features of Old English literature. First, epic poetry. Second, elegiac and lyrical poetry. Third, religious texts. Fourth, prose. Fifth, riddles and proverbs. And there are few images and examples from Old English literature. There are some people behind Old English literature. First, King Alfred. He was a famous king in this era because he was the first stone of English prose and was later passed on by Ælfric and Wulfstan. He was a pioneer in translating their works from Latin to English in the 9th century. During this time, King Alfred ruled the West Saxons between 871 and 906. This translation process aims to restore the culture of the British nation that was destroyed by repeated attacks by Scandinavians. The first book to be translated was Pastoral Care by Pope Gregory. Then King Alfred translated Bede's Ecclesiastical History of English People. Second, Aldhelm. He is a graduate scholar of Canterbury schools, and historically, he was a disciple of Abbot Hadrian, who was a priest from Africa. Then he also studied with Theodore, who was a Greek priest. In addition to writing prose, Algelm was also known as a poet and was well acquainted with classical Latin poets and holy books. In his writings, both prose and poetry. In writing his literary works, Algelm uses a lot of figurative language, such as metaphors and allusions. Venerable Bede. Bede was a prose writer with a sense of Northumbria. Bede was one of the best Christian theologians and historians of his time, who had Angel blood. However, Bede grew up in Wormwood Abbey and later spent his teenage years at the monastery of Jarrow. Bede is known for studying European cultural heritage extensively. He was a person who had an interest in various knowledge. In terms of literary works, there is a major work which is a study of mantras, the science of the chronology of the Christian century, written based on the study of astronomy, martyrology, the story of the churchmen at Werworth and Jarrow, the history of Saint Cuthbert, and the ecclesiastical history of angels. And there are few images and examples from Old English literature. The first one is from Beowulf poem, and the second one is from Exeter book.
Okay, so the next chapter or period from literature is Middle English. The term Middle English literature refers to the literature written in the form of the English language known as Middle English, from the late 12th century until the 1470s. There are three main categories of Middle English literature. 1. Religious literature. It refers to the Christianity that deeply influenced in the culture and society of the time. 2. Courtly love. It revolves around romance, for example, the relationship between knights and ladies. And there are also has nobles. And the third is Arthurian legends. It is the tale of King Arthur, the Knight of the Round Table, and their heroic quests were incredibly popular at that time. During this era, the English language is evolved significantly, absorbing influence from Old France following the Norman conquest. This period followed by the Norman conquest of 1066, which significantly influenced the English language and culture. In literary terms, the characteristics of the literary works written did not change radically until the effects of the Renaissance and Reformed Christianity became more apparent in the reign of King Henry IX. So next, I will tell you the story of Middle English literature. Literature in England in this period was not just in English and Latin, but also in French. Epic and elegy gave way to romance and lyric. English writing revived fully in English after 1360 and flowered in the reign of Richard II. It became a literary standard in London English after 1425 and developed a modern form of verse, prose, and drama. Middle writing was done by hand, For the scribes, the period began and ended with the unwelcome arrivals of two conquerors, Norman in 1066 and the printing press in 1476. English literature survived the first conquest with difficulty. And for the impact of French is the conquest of England in 1066 by William of Normandy. He displaced English as the medium of literature, and for the language of the new rules was French. Middle English writing blossomed in the late 14th century and developed a literary self-consciousness. A clear example of this comes at the end of the Chaucer Troilus and Criseyde. He speaks to his poem in the intimate second person, and here is the poem. And for there is so great diversity in English and in writing of our tongue, so I pray I God that none mistake the term mismerte for the fault of tongue. There are 5 characteristics of Middle English literature. The first one is loss of inflection. The second one is word order in sentences begin to matter. Third, loss of feminine or masculine nouns. Fourth, more phonetic spelling. Fifth, final E pronouns as well as all consonants. Okay, so right now I will introduce you to the most famous person in this era. He is Geoffrey Chaucer, which is everyone called him by the father of poetry. And the Canterbury was the most famous book that written by him. Here are a few images and examples from Middle English literature, and this is the most popular. The first one is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. The second one is Le Morte d'Arthur by Sir Thomas Malory. Okay, so for the summary of all the chapter, we give you the difference between Old and Middle English literature. And the first one is from the definition itself. Old English literature is the literary works such as poetry and prose that created and written in the Old English language. While Middle English literature is in the form of the English language known as Middle English. Second, it is from the time period. Old English is began from the 7th century to the 11th century. Middle English is from the late 12th century until 1470s. The third is from the language. Old English literature very different from modern English, and it is spoken by the Germanic inhabitants in England during that time. And Middle English literature is more recognizable to modern readers than Old English. It is because they are written in the form of the English language. And then the last of the difference is the last one is Old English literature is more focused on heroic cases. And then the last one, Old English literature is more focused on heroic quests and stories of daily life. While Middle English literature is dealing with romance, culture, religion, social tal. While Middle English literature dealt with romance, culture, religion, societal castes, and King Arthur.
Here are the link sources that we take to make this chapter. Old and English literature.
Alright, that's it for the whole explanation for the Old and Middle English literature. If you guys have any questions, please drop them below and ask anything if you do not understand certain chapters. If you do not understand, also please ask anything and we will help you to solve the problem by answer your question.
Thank you for your attention. See you next time.